Yeah, yeah. G'day, Emma. Welcome to Slaying Sober.
G'day, James. Thanks for having me.
No problems. A real pleasure. I'm really pumped to hear your story. So thanks for jumping on.
Yeah.
Tell me about young Emma.
Whoa, there's lots to talk about, young Emma. But where I'll start is pretty much at the beginning. I come from one of those families that were very loving but very dysfunctional, to say
Yes.
the least. I grew up in an environment where my dad worked away at sea. And so he wasn't home for most of my life. It was very much, 6 weeks on, 6 weeks off, a couple of months on, a couple of months off. And, so my mum was kind of left at home to be a single parent, what it felt like sometimes for, the majority of it. And my mum had her own kind of mental health issues herself. She had 3 or 4 kids raising at a time. I have other siblings. And so, it become very chaotic in the home a lot of the time. And so my dad, he had his own drinking and substance issue with alcohol. Yes. And he won't ever say he was an alcoholic. He just said he stopped drinking over 25 years ago. I think it's nearly close to now. But, wow. Demon away at sea and, that kind of lonely life. And my mum had her own...
Was he a fisherman?
Pardon?
Was he a fisherman?
No, so he worked on like oil tankers and, and there was, that's a whole lot of different stories. But, like at one stage they were attacked by pirates and everything. So, so like when he come home, like it was very, there was a lot of arguments in the house. And if they weren't arguing, there was a lot of nana napping and, us kids out in the street. And, but what was happening for me out in the community was, I was being sexually abused by other kids within the neighbourhood at a very young age. I was being sexually abused by an older relative. And so it seemed to be like I had this sexual abuse kind of target that kind of over the top of my head, and I was very sexualized really young and become very hypersexual as a result of that. But, throughout my development and my growing, like I had a lot of physical challenges as well. Like I'm really tall. I'm over 6'2.5". Can't get a half. It makes all the difference between 6'2" and 6'3", right? So in my growing, like my bones, like literally would grow inches at a time, and so my ligaments didn't catch up, and I would dislocate my bones really easily, and I'd have my knee around the other side, and so I was constantly.
You would have been a PE teacher's nightmare, I would have thought.
They did not let me do PE a lot at all. Like, and I love that. I hated PE. I was not running those, the beat test. I can assure you.
And what did your mum do? What did your mum do for work?
Yep. So she worked in a high-powered job in the tax office. Yep. And so it was right up there. And so that compounded her stress as well. It would try to raise us. But for a long period of time, like she stayed at home with us kids and did like a local job at a flower farm. But, like we grew up also in the 80s and 90s through a recession. Yep. And so there wasn't a lot of money coming in. We weren't rich. My parents had a mortgage at 17% interest. So, when we got together, I lived in a dead-end town, one way in, one way out, nothing to do but take drugs or breed like rabbits kind of space.
Whereabouts was that geographically, Emma?
So on Western Port Bay. Yeah. So towards Phillip Island, but not.
I know where you're talking about.
Full of Anyway, so we would all get together, the neighbourhood people, and have barbecues and stuff, And so one person would bring a salad, someone would bring some snacks, and there was always a free flow of alcohol. My idea of having a party that I saw was, you get drunk, you'd pass yourself out, and that would be your good time. And then you'd wake up next day for bacon and eggs for breakfast to kind of mop up the mess. And So that's how I thought
Yeah.
you had a good time. And us kids would be outside playing 40-40 home, or, you know, sneaking some of the alcohol and all that kind of stuff from the adult table, or getting a shandy with them as we got older. You know, but
So when was your first experience then with alcohol and drugs?
yeah, so alcohol and stuff was pretty young, you know, like 8, like really early with alcohol. You know, at one stage, my sister would have parties and she'd think that it's funny to get me and my brother drunk. So, like, I remember
Yeah.
at 9 years old that happening. But I also, like, I'm a foodie, right? So,
Yeah.
my mum was given a box of cherry liqueur chocolates, like, for a Christmas gift. And I remember finding it
Yeah.
in her cupboard, and I demolished the whole box, not realizing that it was liqueur chocolate, and I was fucked. Like, it
Yeah,
was,
yeah, right.
yeah, you know, but then I would also go get the amoxicillin out of the cupboard, or out of the fridge, and have that because it was creamy. Like, so
Yeah, yeah.
my addictive behaviors were really, really young. But what was
Yes.
behind all that too was this emptiness and this longing for belonging. And I was in so much fear, you know, like
Yeah.
throughout my childhood as well, like outside of the abuse that I was having, you know, that at that stage my parents didn't know about. We had a prowler at my house, and so just about every night from the ages of like 6, 7 till I was about 15, 16, someone would knock on my window and they would talk to me through my window, and they would ask me to open up the door and let them in. And I remember being paralyzed with fear, and I would try to scream, but like nothing would come out. And we had
Wow.
at our house multiple times, and it was around the time of Mr. Cruel being there, and this man used to wear a balaclava or an old man mask, and so it became incredibly
Yeah.
frightening to stay in my home. And like my mum,
That's petrifying.
absolutely. And so, like, it would be like the night would move, and next minute, you know, there's tapping, and I'd find my mum at like 3 o'clock in the morning, you know, with a golf club in her hand, you know, screaming for this person to leave us alone, and you know, and so I saw the fear in my parents' face when this would happen, and my dad wasn't home to protect us. So as I got
Yeah.
older, you know, to get to sleep at night, like sometimes I would have so many cones to kind of knock myself out, so I could
Yeah.
sleep and not be in that fear, you know. But that went on for years and
So that
years.
became a coping strategy for you at a young
Yeah,
age,
yeah,
that you were able to. You turned to food at one point,
yeah,
and then, you know, to be able to help you sleep
yeah,
in this petrifying moment,
yeah,
that
absolutely.
drugs were something that would help you sleep.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and then, you know, and because I'm also really tall and I'm really large, you know, like I was picked on relentlessly. So, you know, I got this stuff
Yeah.
going on at home, and then I go to school and I'm being really bullied really a lot, especially by my friends that I thought were my friends. Like I was that friend that
Yes.
everyone picked on. You know, I
Oh,
was the one that was always it for Tiggy because I could never catch anybody. And then I would use my
yeah.
sore knees as an excuse why I couldn't play. You know,
Yeah.
so always.
Kids are so bloody cruel. I'm so sorry that you had to deal with that, Emma.
No, that's okay, man. Like I understand that now, but you know, it was really painful to, you know, just feel like I didn't fit in anywhere. Like I have a brother that's a
Yep.
football cricket superstar, and I had a sister that
Yep.
was a supermodel, kind of brains of the operation, who went to
Mm.
university, went and did modeling, and then moved away when I was, you know, only 15, and then I was kind of left at home with my mum, you know, who wasn't traveling the best. And so, you know, my brother kind of, his experience is very different. So is my sister's. But, you know, what I remember is someone that was desperately alone. And I took all that kind of burden on, you know, it was very, very hard. And so I turned to drugs to escape from that a lot, you know.
Mm.
You know, but then I
How's your relationship with your siblings now?
we talk, but they're all
Yep.
interstate in different areas. Like I got recovery, and my brother moved, and so did my parents, because they
Yep.
said they could safely do that. But you
Yeah.
know, there was a lot of stuff throughout, you know, like even when I was, you know, going through like high school and stuff like that, you know, like I just wanted that friendship circle. So a lot of the time I spent my time in the library or in the toilet by myself. But I remember like
Yeah.
longing to, you know, I wish I went to prison. Like I wish I was in a convent. I wish I went away to somewhere else other than where I was, because I just
Yeah.
didn't want to be there. I hated me. And in the end,
Yeah.
nobody could say anything to me about myself that I was saying worse about myself. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
I hated me,
Yep.
everything about me.
So how did you find comfort, and how did you find company in that time of your life?
Yeah. So a lot of the time, you know, I found people that were like-minded in the drug scene and
Yeah.
alcohol. I looked for comfort in
Yep.
men. You know,
Yep.
I looked for comfort wherever I could find it. And a lot of those myself was self-soothing stuff. And that was, you know, either sexual acts or food or self-harm. You know, there was a lot of that was happening for me. And I was so afraid of dying, but I ran to it.
Yeah.
Like, I watched my nan go through really bad cancer when I was younger. She died of breast cancer, but she was going through clinical trials that now have saved so many women and men, you know, but
Yeah.
my nan went through that excruciating, painful trial, and I watched that. And my mum kept saying to me, you know, I'm going to die young. I'm going to die young. And so in my head, I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm going to have my dad away and my mum's going to die. You know,
Yep.
later on in life, my mum had a botched operation on her appendix, and next minute she very much looked like she would die, and I become really fearful. But at that stage, I'm stuck in my addiction, so I'm acting out in other ways to cope, and it looked like I didn't give a shit about anything else other than myself. But I was so afraid of losing everybody and everything that I pushed it away. You know.
Did you notice that fear when you were in your addiction and around that time, or is it retrospectively now that you're looking at it?
Yeah. I definitely knew what fear was, especially when I would have the prowler knocking on my window. Like, there was no other way that I could describe what I was feeling. And, you know, it got to a point like even my friends wouldn't have sleepovers, because when they did, he would guarantee to rock up on my house and knock on my window. So, you know, it kept me really isolated and constantly in fear that is he coming, you know? Tonight.
Did that ever get resolved?
No, so he just stopped showing up, you know, and there's a lot of theories around what happened. But like I said, it was around the time of Mr. Cruel and what was happening with him. So they reckon that there may be some tandem work going on with that. But, you know, that we later on found out about certain stuff through other means. But, you know, like it just didn't stop. Like it, you know, we'd find size 13 shoe prints outside my window, you know, on the dirt, and you know, my brother would wake up and you know, he would be like, oh, the shadow wants to come in, Poppy. Like, I've just got to let him in. And my pop's like, what? And he goes, yeah, he's at my window. And so it become this massive kind of like, how do we, and we couldn't move because back then, like the interest rates were so massive, we couldn't leave the home, and so we couldn't do anything about it besides ring the police. And to be honest, most of the times the police thought that my mum was just some scared lady whose husband worked away at sea.
Yeah, wow.
Mm-hmm.
That's so harsh, isn't it?
Yeah. You know, but so that's where it become like the drugs when I was 15, when that really kicked in. I was smoking all the time and I was drinking to the point of blackout. And then amphetamines come along. You know, one of my friend's mums introduced me to that, and I liked it.
One of your friend's mums.
Yeah. She asked if I had had Louis before, and I went, "What's that?" And when I went, "What's that?" she's like, "Drink." And so I did, and I freaking loved it. But what happened was my head went quiet, and then there was older gentlemen there that night that took full advantage, you know, and so my life become this whole spiral of sex and drugs and violence and this longing for belonging, and this God-shaped hole in my soul kept getting bigger and bigger. And I couldn't tell my family about what I was doing, and I couldn't, I was in counselling though from 15 because one of my friends died from an asthma attack while she was chroming, and her friends left her.
Wow.
And so I went to a counsellor and I said, I'm not okay. And then become a string of really close deaths to me. I had a friend that was killed by a serial killer. There was multiple suicides that had happened, and a car accident at a funeral. Murders by family members, not my family members, but theirs. And then, there was losses of babies and, friends that, just died. And so I've then become surrounded by death, and my escape was, again, to just keep using, and I went to heroin, and my uncle passed away when I was about 2 or 3 years old from a heroin overdose. And my mum didn't know he was an addict, but substance abuse has been in my family my whole life. Like, it's that generational trauma and that intergenerational addiction. So I was either predisposed or it was just, in my genetics and, like that.
Do you feel that you turned to heroin to silence all the death that was around you and to try and silence all that loud noise of the trauma that you've experienced as a teenager?
I think that's one of the reasons that I started to use to escape that stuff. Heroin, how I got introduced to that, and I don't even know why I took it. I think because my whole life I heard, oh my God, if you have this, you're going to die. Do not touch it, you will die. And that's not anything against my mum for teaching me that, because I've seen my friends die from heroin, right? But I remember lending someone $20 at a pool place, good old Silver Q and Crannies. And she goes, oh, I'll give you a cap of smack. And I went, oh, what's that? She goes, come to the city and meet me and I'll show you. And me and a friend went there, and I had it, and I just went, oh my God, where's this been my whole life? And then the next time the person goes to me, well, if you want to lose weight, just stick out your arm. And so I stuck out my arm, and that's how I become an IV user. And so for a long period of time, like, I didn't do it myself until someone said, if you want to do that, mate, you can do it yourself. And I quickly learnt how to do it. I thought I knew what an addiction was with heroin because I took it and ran with it. But it wasn't till later I really understood what an addiction looked like. But, through that period of time with the heroin, and it's through the 90s as well, like that real heroin craze, 97, 98, 99, 2000s into that era, like it was all the time. And then, my parents found out that I was using heroin, and my mum ran outside and spewed in the garden, and because I was already sick. I was already done with it. I'd already been, there was a lot of abuse, and there was a lot of self-harm, and there was a lot of, getting into trouble already at a really young age. But and then I fell pregnant at 19. And so, and so
when your mum found out that you were on heroin, how did she handle that? You mentioned she was physically sick.
Yeah.
But was she supportive, or was she highly critical in that time?
No, so they were really supportive. They're like, oh my God, what do we do? So they took me back to my drug and alcohol counsellor from high school, who I actually still talk to this day.
Wow.
That's a whole different story, but he's incredible. And he walked in and he's like, oh, I knew you'd be back. Like, he just knew I'd be back.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, I just need help, mate, And so, I did the naltrexone, and I did the pharmacotherapy stuff, and I'd put that down, but I'd pick up pot, or I'd pick up alcohol, or I'd go to speed, or I'd go to pills. And I went, I'm not using heroin. I'm all good.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not doing that. But I'm doing everything else as much as I could as well. And so it just, so once I tried, sorry, just going to back up a second. So when I fell pregnant, like I put that all down because I was so sick when I was pregnant with my son. But I went looking for like the baby daddy because my son's dad's like 16 years older than me, and he was, you know, into his bikes and heavily tattooed, and my mum's like, you can't be near him, you can't do that, stay away. And so I just went looking wherever, you know, and so it got me into really bad, difficult situations that, you know, affected both me and my son. And when I had him, because I was so sick when I was pregnant, like really bad, hospitalized a lot. But when I had him, like I become
from withdrawal.
No, just from being pregnant. Like I had, that happens to women sometimes when, you know, they're pregnant, really unwell. But when I had him, like I become like the older sister. Like I was I don't know what was going on. I was massively depressed. I couldn't hear him crying, you know, and then I just kind of shut off and disconnected a lot. And everybody else did stuff for me, you know. I lived back at home with mum and dad, and they took care of him. And I still wanted to go out on a Friday night and have a good time, you know, because I deserved that and I earned that. So I'm going. And sometimes I wouldn't come home for days at a time, you know, and so my life was still consumed by, you know, drugs and alcohol and sex and all these things that I tried to use to fill myself. And, you know, and what they did was put me in hospital beds with tubes up my nose and police sitting next to me with my child, you know, because I get put into really violent situations with violent people. And the more the violence, the more the drugs, the more insane my life looked, you know. And
so we talk about our active addiction leading to jails, institutions, or death, and we touched a lot on death there, and you're sort of touching on the institutions that, you know, that have been put in front of you or that you've found yourselves in. Can you touch on that a little bit more?
Yeah, absolutely. So my first like detox I tried when I was like 20. I did like a couple of day detox, didn't really like it, walked out, you know, because I was fraternizing with somebody that I shouldn't have. And so I do in the meds line. And then, but I was so unwell, like even in there, like I was ordered back to bed because my blood pressure was too low and they'd have to give me injections because I was so malnourished and all that kind of stuff. And which I think is one of the reasons I put on so much weight, because they just dose me up with that stuff. But that's my excuse not to do it. You know, ripples out years later. You know, I went to a rehab called Teen Challenge. And that's, you know, I didn't believe in God. It was a God-based Christian rehab, but it's the only one in Victoria I could get into straight away. You know, got out of an extremely violent relationship, and my mum was sitting in the shopping centre and crying, and this man come up to her and asked if she was okay, and said, no, my daughter's going to die and I don't know how to help her. And so my mum explained the situation, and the man said, well, there's a rehab that we can get her into by the end of the week. And so they had me up there in no time at all. It's in Kyabram. And, you know, I went up there and I stayed like 6 months max. You know, so I tried it, and then I thought that I got baptized and I thought I was saved, and I walked back out and I started using again, you know, like even worse than before.
So you had 6 months of clean time?
Yeah, but when I was at home, I had some bottles of alcohol under my bed, and so I was drinking that on leave, you know, but I didn't see alcohol as a drug, so I still didn't include it. I'm like, I'm just drinking. That's fine. And they didn't drug test me when I got back, so that was all good.
Yeah.
You know? But then I walked out of there, and then I thought, well, I'll get baptized again and see if that works. And it still didn't. I ran more drugs and into more, you know, violent relationships. And and all this kind of stuff, and it got brought into the home and my family, and and my parents were just at a loss. They're like, I don't know what to do anymore. Like, I just didn't stop. I didn't care. Like, everybody knew that I was an addict. Like, the whole town knew that Emma's on drugs. It was like, poor Emma this, and I just was so done. I just didn't care. And the people I was running with, it was just so hectic. And, and so, like, and I had a nickname on the street. I was called Big Bird. Like, no one knew my real name. It was just, me with my bright yellow Ford Laser. And it was just hectic.
Big Bird.
Yeah. It become like, I was just one of those cranny street thugs, mate, but I was loud. So it was, and I didn't give a shit what people thought about me, to be honest. So I did what I wanted when I wanted, and it caused a lot of issues with a lot of people. And so, I wanted to walk away from that stuff, and I found my ex-husband. The ex is the word.
Yeah.
And I thought that was going to save me, I was
thought love would solve you.
Yeah, I thought love would heal me, but it wasn't love. It was one of those hostage relationships. I got married on Election Day 2007. I voted in my wedding dress, and I reckon I got shafted worse than Kevin Rudd did. But I shafted him pretty bad too, My wife, I didn't know how to be a wife. I didn't know how to be a person really in society. And there was drugs involved in our relationship, and it was very turbulent. And I moved like 7 houses from my mum and dad. And so it become like everyone loves Raymond. And it's like, they're coming, like, lock the door. I'm too fucking cooked for this shit. Like, it's, it become this state of fear and hiding. And, and so I thought at periods of time that, people wouldn't see that I was still using. But, the reality was I couldn't hide my addiction, James. Like, I was, I was a mess. My life was a mess, and everybody could see that. And so I then fell pregnant again. I fell pregnant with twins who were really unwell. And so, that wasn't because of drug use or anything. That was because I did an actual medical impossibility, and I had twin-to-twin transfusion. So usually, twins, they can run off one cord and it'll go backwards and forwards to each other. Anyway, it's highly deadly. But mine are the twins that aren't twins. So I fell pregnant twice in 5 days from each other. So that should never happen. Yeah. And so,
amazing.
I was in hospital with them, and I was in, again, constant fear of losing my children.
Yes.
No one would tell me what was happening. No one would tell me what was wrong. I just knew that it was another day until I would see them. And I went through the most scariest time of my life, what I felt like alone. My husband was still using drugs. I kept asking him to stop, and he wouldn't. And I'm in hospital bed by myself. And when he'd come in, he'd be stoned. And there was a lot of disconnection. And there was just a lot of, I have a boy at home now as well that needed looking after. And I just wasn't there. When I had them.
So did you see this as an opportunity to gain clean time and for a new start when you had the twins?
Well, at that stage, I didn't really feel that. Like, I thought that my addiction, like, I wasn't an addict anymore because I was just smoking pot and drinking. Because I put down the heroin, I'd put down the speed, I'd put down the other stuff. Like, it wasn't an issue for me, So I'm all good now. I'm cured. So when I stopped all that stuff, like, it wasn't an issue really. But when I had my daughter, they were only £3.3 and £3.6 born. Like, they were little as. But I was feeding my daughter for the first time, and she stopped. Her heart stopped, and the nurse is like, "Oh my God, give me a baby! She's just died." And I'm like, "What?" And they're like, "Yeah, she just died. Give me." And she rips her out of my arms and throws her back and whacks her chest and restarts her. And so she went into congenital failure, and I went into freak out mode, going, "What?" And so all these fears that I've had, like, all come up because when I found out I was pregnant, one of my friend's babies died from SIDS. And so my head goes into this fear of, oh my God, I've just lost my child. And so the first thing I did, I went home and I escaped when I could, and I used, you know, and I started using again, and I didn't, breast, like, too much information, but like I couldn't even breastfeed. It was gone. It dried up in a second. And so my maternal stuff was just being crushed again, you know, and I felt like a failure. And, you know, they're both thriving now. You know, you wouldn't even tell that they were preemie, you know, but one got epilepsy out of that. She grew out of it, but because of the rush of blood to her head. But then another lot of fear happened when she was 2 around that. So, like, all these things, and I'm trying to protect and look after, and all I was doing, it felt like creating more chaos and in my life and not being able to handle that. So my solution was to use a drug. You know,
I imagine that it must be the whole concept of having children and then struggling to connect with them as a new mother must be incredibly stressful, you know, like to say that you've gone and used on the back of that. You know, it's one of the most stressful things that you can do is bring children into the world. And it's such a beautiful thing, you know, or it's seen as such a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
But it can be incredibly triggering as well. And I can empathize with your experience there, Emma.
Yeah, well, and that's exactly right. People expect that you have this instant bond and this instant connection, and it wasn't there for me. Like, I even had my tubes tied, and you know what I did though, James, and the doctors begged me not to, you know, like, I didn't even want morphine when I had my children because I said to them, I'm an addict and I don't want medication. You have a cesarean and get your tubes tied and tell them you don't want morphine. Like, I was adamant. I was clean, you know. Oh my God, I wish they had dosed me up. That was painful. But, you know, like I wanted
so you did that? You did that without meds?
Without
wow.
Yeah, the only thing I had was an epidural. But once that wore off, like, that was, it was so chaotic.
That was it.
I didn't want my children being brought into the world with a substance, because I didn't want to give them that experience from me. And, you know, I was so frightened of what that looked like for them, you know. And and so I was in.
It's interesting you should say that. Like, we talk about, you know, I've got the moon boot that I've just taken off. I've just had surgery myself, and I definitely wasn't a tough guy like you. You know, I was happy to have the pain meds prescribed to me by the doctor. But it was something for me that I had to speak with my sponsor about in my program, that they're giving me oxycodone and you know, opiates that I can walk out and take home with, you know, a pocket full of opiates. Like, I'm an addict. I don't have the ability to manage that myself. So I have to talk about with my sponsor how I manage that. And that is that my wife holds my medication and she administers it to me upon my request, and well within the parameters that are prescribed to me.
Yeah.
I felt like absolute shit off. I think I had about an eighth of the pain medication that I was supposed to, and my moods and my ups and downs made it not worth the relief from the pain that it gave me. My mental state was far more compromised than what the physical pain was, and I put those down and haven't touched those in my recovery from this ankle surgery. Like, it's a very first world problem, but it's something, and I'm definitely not as tough as you, but it's something us addicts need to consider when these things are occurring.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can by no means think that I'm tough, mate. I look back on it now and go, what was I thinking? Because, because it was painful. But like I have high pain tolerance anyway. Like I walk around on broken feet or, all kinds of stuff. But, but I was also an abuser of the oxys and all that kind of stuff too. So because as a result of like injuries from assaults and stuff like that, my trigeminal nerve was damaged at one stage. And so like I would have constant zapping on the side of my head, and to the point I had to get my teeth removed, and and then they would send me out with a box of Endone and said, we can't tell you what to do with this because this pain's like really bad, but whatever you do is up to you. And I would just eat them like lollies and then go, it's still hurting, give me more. And so they just kept feeding that for a period of time until they didn't. And then I went, well, this is the same as heroin. Like I'll just go back to that. And then I wanted speed. And then it become this, I'll just have anything. And, like when I was younger and I first started using, and I was using heroin, how I thought I'd trick my parents to not thinking I was on it is that I would have heroin first because my eyes are really small, and then I would go have speed afterwards to make my eyes really big, and then it would make me get
That's
that shit. Like, you know what I mean?
An addict.
An addict that's at my time, that's for sure. But I thought I could do that and hide it. So I didn't know if I was Arthur or Martha, mate. And so that became a regular occurrence throughout my using, is that I was a poly user and I used to extremes. And not just a little bit.
Yes.
I had like a Chinese soup ladle was my spoon, and because I couldn't get enough. And, and as it progressed more and more, because then my life becomes so chaotic and insane, like I start to lose all those things, I lose my sanity for a start. But, then like I lose my marriage. I lost the job that I was working in. I worked in a factory with a lot of people, and they watched me descend, and they talked about me and gossiped through the 8-second grapevine of the, the production line, the old,